they said, "Annette, what do you think about this knot in Amy's neck?" And I remember being alarmed and thinking, oh my, and I tried every way in the world to get her to say she'd been sick. I remember hearing when it came back as Hodgkin's.
And he just took us in this little room and said, it's definitely cancer, and it's stage 4, and it's everywhere, and there's nothing we can do.
When I found out, everything runs through your head. Is she gonna roll right through this? Is it gonna be long term? Is she not going to make it? Therefore, what's my role going to be after that?
Amy pretty much kept it from me, and when they did finally come home and tell me about it, we all went up there and the doctor talked to us.
She was always a happy little girl, always smiley. She's always had that pretty smile.
Amy was always Daddy's girl, and being Daddy's girl never changed. She became quite a tomboy.
Well, when she was basically pretty young, she, like 8 or 9 years old. Of course, I messed with the old cars, so I had a shop there at the house, and she'd always come out and sat on this stool, and I still got the stool to this day, and answer the phone for me and play secretary, and, anything to be with Dad.
Amy would put his boots on and go stomping through that garage with one of his old caps on her head. And he would give her a piece of sandpaper, and she thought she was really something, because she was doing body work on cars, she'd tell you.
She was probably 3, maybe 3.5. She got in an old car that was sitting in the driveway idling and pulled that thing down in reverse. Went right through the fence, hit the telephone pole, bounced back, pulled it down into drive, run it into my old pickup, and shoved it into the corner of the garage.
Amy and I, we did everything. We went roller skating. We would go swimming at Fast Night Park. We hang out with her dad. I can remember him there'd be the shop, and I didn't know how to do anything outside, and Amy did. She knew how to mow a lawn and how to do all that stuff, and we just were always together. We would walk, because back then kids would walk around, like they'd walk to the store, and Amy and I would do that. Just any everyday life, we were together and doing it together.
I found out I was pregnant with Amy, and that was quite a shock, because we had no intentions of having another child.
The most impactful early memory I have was my parents telling me that they were getting divorced. They sat me on the couch in our living room, and my brother stood next to my dad on that side of the room, and my sister stood next to my mom at the back door. My mom had a black leather purse on her shoulder and her keys in her hand, and she just said, "Amy, your dad and I are getting divorced. We're leaving tonight. Your sister's coming with me. Your brother's staying with your dad. We're going to let you decide what you want to do." I felt unhappy and worthless.
When Amy's parents got divorced, it was a difficult time being at her mom's and then being at her dad's, and clearly she loved her parents, both her parents. That was hard because she was the baby, and I don't really know if she knew issues were going on or if they weren't, but she didn't talk about it all the time. It definitely affected Amy.
Amy was kind of torn in between Mom and Dad.
Amy just went back and forth because she didn't know what to do. She just really felt lost.
I never really felt like I belonged anywhere. I wanted to belong somewhere. I wanted to be wanted. And when my parents got divorced, I didn't live any one particular place. My mom chose my sister, my dad chose my brother in my mind, and I was just kind of left to float. When my mom left, everything fell apart. It was broken. I missed having a family. Nobody wanted me bad enough to insist on having me, other than maybe my sister, and she was a child also.
Amy was kind of a little spitfire, very headstrong, felt like she could do what she wanted to because she deserved to. We clashed a lot, and I always hated that, and every time we did, she'd go to her dad's.
I had a fair amount of attitude. I felt like by the time I was a teenager that no one was going to tell me what to do. No one took the time to raise me when I was a child, and they certainly weren't going to give me their opinion when I was a teenager. So that was true. She was right about that.
She met Eric, and that was it for her.
I thought he was cute. I used to follow Eric in the hallway and just be like, little girl giddy over him. And then he got transferred into my earth science class.
Right off the bat, saw her and couldn't take my eyes off of her after that. I remember asking several classmates who she was. She just had a thing about her, you know, just a spark and an aura that just, it was hard to look away from.
Eric and I had one of those tumultuous relationships where we broke up all the time, and we were broken up at the time. I woke up that morning for whatever reason and thought, I'm pregnant, and was certain I was pregnant. And I got ready for school like normal and got in my car, and on the way to school there was a crisis pregnancy center on Cherry Street, and I knew that they gave free pregnancy tests. I went in and took a pregnancy test, and sure enough I was pregnant. So I ran out of there and went to school like life was normal.
Amy came home from school and said she wanted to talk to me, and I said, what's going on? And she said, well, I have something I need to tell you. And I said, what, are you pregnant? And she looked at me and said, huh? I said, are you going to have a baby? And she said, well, sort of. I said, you don't sort of have a baby. You're either pregnant or you're not. She said, well, Mom, I'm going to have 2 babies. I'm pregnant with twins.
I was not prepared for it, wasn't ready for it. I feel that Amy was, I think she wanted children and wanted marriage at a young age. And I was not ready for it. We weren't prepared for it. It changed everything for me.
I left Eric a pamphlet on his door with a note and said I was pregnant. So he came to my dad's house, and before Eric and I were ever sexually active, I said to him, you should know that I will not have an abortion. So if I get pregnant, I will have a baby. I want to make sure we have this conversation now, not later. So that night when he came to my dad's, he said, I have to ask you 2 questions. And I think I already know the answer, but I have to ask you anyway. And I said, okay, go right ahead. And he said, any chance it's not my baby? And I said, no. And he said, any chance you'll have an abortion? And I said, no. And he said, okay.
Amy was a senior in high school, and she and Eric had been together quite a while, but they were not married. And when he found out about the pregnancy, he was not happy because they weren't married, that he wasn't ready to be married, and he did not want her to have the babies. She was determined that she would have them. And so she had the babies, and they were about 16 months old, I guess, 15 months maybe, when they married. Eric had joined the Army, and when he came home on leave, they got married.
We did get married, and then the military moved us to Fort Polk. I asked her to marry me while I was in Germany. So I went overseas. When we got back, we got married, and then Fort Polk is where we got stationed at.
Amy sent me a Christmas card while they were there that year. She and Eric and the girls, and I could tell by her face that she wasn't doing well.
It was Christmas time, and Eric said, I have a surprise for you. I'm taking you home to see the family for Christmas. And so after Christmas, we drove home to see the family. We got here that night. He said, I'm going out with my buddies, and I didn't bring you here for Christmas. I brought you here because I'm leaving you.
When they got here, after we had our Christmas, Eric told Amy that he had brought her back here to stay, that he was going back by himself, that he just didn't want to be married.
I was devastated, really. I felt abandoned and betrayed and unhappy and worthless, like he didn't want me. I felt really angry. It felt like my mom leaving again. Though I didn't belong anywhere, I didn't have anywhere, I was mad. I was mad at him. I moved in with my dad, me and the girls. I was gonna go back to school and get on with my life and do my own thing, take care of myself and my kids. I remember I had this blue and white gingham dress that I was wearing and looking quite good in, actually. I'd lost all my baby weight and I'm feeling good about myself, and drove my girls to Mount Vernon and dropped them off, and I was driving back to go to algebra and singing in the car, and I wanted to feel the way my chest and voice vibrated, so I put my hand on my throat, and when I did, I felt something on my collarbone. It felt like a golf ball, and I wasn't really sure what it was, but I went to algebra class and said, hey, do you guys see something on my throat? And everyone was like, yeah, dude, what is that? You know, didn't know what it was. My grandma was in the hospital, so I went to the hospital, and my aunts and my mom and everyone was there, so I was like, hey, do you guys see this on my throat? Like, there's something on my throat. And
They said, Annette, what do you think about this knot in Amy's neck? And I remember being alarmed and thinking, oh my.
She had a big knot right here. And I said, what is that? She wasn't sure. She went to the doctor.
he said, have you been tired lately? And I said, yes. And he said, more tired than normal? And I said, I have twin daughters. They're a year and a half old, and I'm taking 18 hours in college. I'm tired. He said, have you lost any weight in the last year, any significant amount of weight? And I said, I have twin babies that are a year and a half old, so yes, I've lost a significant amount of weight, but that's normal. And he said, have you been sick, running a fever, sore throat, anything like that? And I said, no. And he said, do you have cats? And I said, no, I'm actually scared of cats. And he said, okay, he's like, then I don't think it's mono, and I don't think it's cat scratch fever. I'm afraid that you have Hodgkin's disease. He said, do you sweat at night? And I said, yeah, a lot. Like, I think it's a swollen sweat gland because I'm sweating so much. And he said, unfortunately, night sweats in that way are final stages of Hodgkin's, and I want to have a surgeon look at you as soon as possible.
We went for the biopsy. We went over there at 5 in the morning, and she was one of the first ones to go in. But it took forever for them to come and talk to me. They said the doctor will be here in 1 hour to talk to you. They were waiting for lab results. So I called her dad, and he came over because he wanted to be there to see what the doctor said. And he just took us in this little room and said, it's definitely cancer, and it's stage 4, and it's everywhere, and there's nothing we can do.
I remember asking my mom, what'd they say, what'd they say, what'd they say? And she sat with her hands white knuckling the steering wheel, not looking at me at all, just looking straight ahead, and said, not much, they didn't say much. And I said, well, I want to know, what did they say? Even if it was not much, what did they say? And she said, not much, they didn't say much. And she was very stoic and no expression on her face, and it was making me mad because she wouldn't give me more information. I could be a brat, I think I mentioned. So I said, well, were they optimistic or pessimistic? Which one? And she said they were not optimistic, Amy.
My mother-in-law came to the door, and Amy went in, and Jerry went over and met her and took her into the bedroom, and his mom came out on the porch and started hugging me. And she kept saying, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And I said, well, excuse me. I said, don't be, because I'm not giving up. I don't care what he says. I'm not giving up.
My dad and sister told me what the doctor said, and that they thought I would live about 3 months, and they didn't recommend any chemo treatment, just to kind of let me ride it out and make memories with the girls and enjoy what time I had left.
It's devastating to have someone tell you that.
They just had to be wrong, you know. They just had to be wrong because I had 2 babies, and that was just what that was. They just had to be wrong. We started trying to find other doctors that would give a different opinion. So there were conversations. My cousin Annette in Kansas City was a nurse of some kind, ultrasound tech or something, so my mom called her to say, do you know any doctors in Kansas City?
I had a niece in medical school, so I called her, and she said she would talk to the doctor in charge and see if he had any suggestions.
When I spoke with some of the doctors I worked with, when I told them they lived in Springfield, the doctors in Kansas City thought Springfield was a small town. They didn't, know. And then we spoke with another oncologist, and he said, no, they've got good doctors in Springfield, and he gave us the name.
So she called me back and said he has 6 children, and if any one of them was in Amy's situation, he'd take them to Springfield, to Dr. Morgan.
When she had been to the emergency room doctor had told her that she only had like a few months to live and that she needed to get her affairs in order. And I mean, she wasn't given any hope for getting better.
He looked at the reports from the biopsy and what those doctors had said, and he said, I think we can do this.
When I became acquainted with Amy, at that time I was practicing in Springfield, Missouri, and what I remember about that was this young mother coming in with her 2 beautiful daughters, and she had been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. And we then proceeded to treat her with chemotherapy, and that was back in the days when we did not have the good supportive therapy for cancer treatment that we do now. So the nausea medicines and other supportive treatments weren't as effective as they are. So it was very difficult chemotherapy for her. And she did have a lot of side effects.
I got really sick. The chemo was terrible. The stuff that they gave me to keep me from throwing up after the chemo made me throw up, for sure. And they recommended I use cream soda. It was like a large syringe full of this medication that they now have in pill form, thank God. But I would have to empty this large syringe into some other drink that I could get down, and it would almost every time start the process of throwing up, and I was sick. I was really sick. My body was going through hell. I mean, there's just no polite way of saying what my body was going through. I don't, you don't really know what chemo is until you have chemo. I couldn't raise my arm. There was a point where, I couldn't eat. I couldn't function. There was one day that I was just slobbering. I remember thinking my organs were going to come through my throat. Like I had nothing else to throw up, but I was still throwing up. And my mom came to my dad's to get me. My dad stayed with the girls, and she took me to the doctor, and I couldn't speak. I had nothing left in me, nothing.
She was still suffering. I mean, it was hard. She was sick. She was so weak, she couldn't hardly stand up.
I was losing everything that came into me. So there was just nothing, literally nothing. I couldn't keep anything inside of me. So yeah, I was frail. Not as frail at that point as I was by the end of it. I continued to lose weight, but I was frail. From the very beginning, Dr. Morgan said, I'll give you enough chemo to kill you. You'll decide if you live or die. I wasn't really sure what he meant about that, so he did expand on it quite frequently. And it was attitude, like my approach to things made a big difference. And he would prove that to me every week, because when I would arrive there, we would do blood work and then x-rays, and then he would wait an hour to get those back before giving me chemo and then give me the chemo. So each time I could walk into his office and he would say either, looks like we had a rough week, what's going on, what's been happening this week, or, looks like you had a good week, great, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And he would always know that by the way my tumors grew or shrank, and he would show that to me on the x-rays every single week, and he was always right. I was afraid to be afraid. I had to be strong and tough and all of that, and so there were moments that I would hide in my closet and cry so that no one would see it. There were moments that I would go to take a shower, and visually seeing my body naked and exposed was difficult for me. I mean, I had this big thing poking out of my chest, and I was skeletal. I was so skinny and bald, and I can remember standing in the shower, crying in the shower. That was a place that no one could hear me cry. I just wanted to give up.
She was ready to quit, which was really not acceptable, because even in an advanced stage, we knew that Hodgkin's lymphoma was potentially curable. And her mother was there also, and we basically did not let her quit.
At this point, I was really angry with God, because I thought that I had worked through this process with God. Like, I felt like I was following what God wanted me to do, and was saying, yeah, it's okay, go ahead and give up. Like, somehow I thought that's what God was leading me to do. So the girls were sitting on the floor where they sat and watched television, and I was laying on the couch, and they're sitting just like this, shoulder to shoulder on their knees next to each other, and I'm praying, and I'm kind of cursing. I hadn't really prayed that way before, but I was like, I don't want a soft whisper, I don't want a gentle voice, I don't want any of that. Like, I want a sign that I can't argue with, that I can't say, well, did you mean this or did you mean that? Like, I want a clear, what do I do? Do I keep fighting this fight, or do I give in? Like, is it time to give up? And I'm praying this in my mind, and they simultaneously turned their little faces and looked right in my soul, like not like I'm looking at you, but right in my soul. And then just turned back around, and there was no greater sign than that sign. And it was almost like God said, what are you talking about? They're right in front of you. I gave them to you. The twins are right in front of you. I mean, I gave you 2 signs a year and a half ago. Let me remind you what they look like, and turn them around. And they didn't just look in my eyes, they really got into my soul.
And she persevered and got through the treatment, and she did have a complete remission.
After Amy went through all the treatments and the radiation and went back for her first checkup, she was totally cancer-free.
I learned to love myself. I learned to trust in myself and my ability, and the fact that I was enough. wasn't supposed to be able to have any more babies. And lo and behold, I got pregnant with Andrew. And that was 7 years, well, 5 years, I guess, after chemo. He's 7 years younger than the girls. So yeah, I got a surprise. And my mom was like, that can't be possible. We have to call Dr. Morgan, of course, because, you know, everyone said I couldn't have babies. But he said he was not surprised at all, that I had always been a miracle and, you know, would probably continue to be.